Today's video is brought to you by Cars and Bids, my online enthusiast car auction site that recently sold this, and this, and this, and this, and this. This is the new 2023 Honda Accord, and it's the latest version of a legend. For decades, the Accord has been one of the most popular cars in the United States, but it's slipping as buyers are starting to turn more towards crossovers and SUVs. Last year, the Subaru Crosstrek sold more than the Honda Accord, but now there's a brand new, fully redesigned Accord to help boost things back up, and today I'm going to review it and show you all of its quirks and features. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the new Honda Accord with a little overview of this vehicle and its current, well, let's call it the situation. Back in the day, Honda used to sell Accords. Throughout the late 90s and the 2000s, they sold 400,000 of these every year, over 1,000 Accords every single day, and it constantly competed for the title of most popular car in the United States. It was a mainstay on the US automotive market, and it continued that dominance through kind of the early 2010s, about a decade ago, and then the SUV happened and sales started to fall. Now, in 2020, Accord sales were under 200,000 units for the first time since 1982. And of course, that was the pandemic year, there were supply constraints, but even last year, with things more back to normal, only 150,000 Accord units sold, a shadow of its former self. In fact, the Accord now barely hangs on to the top 25 most popular cars, and last year it was outsold by the Subaru Crosstrek, yeah, but also the Jeep Wrangler and the Tesla Model 3. Obviously those are popular cars, but this is the Honda Accord, one of the most popular cars ever, and yet, well, it isn't anymore. Now, this hasn't exactly been doom and gloom for Honda because they've been a big part of the SUV revolution. The CR-V compact crossover came out in the late 90s, the Pilot midsize came out in the mid-2000s, and the tiny HR-V recently joined the lineup, and they all combine for absolutely massive sales figures. But the Accord has certainly waned in popularity, and so has the midsize sedan segment in general. Now, the good news for people who still like cars like this is that Honda is still committed to building it. 150 to 200,000 sales a year. It's not where it used to be, but it's still enough to justify new Accords using the same formula as ever, which is reliable, simple, roomy, efficient. That's what the Accord has always been, and that's what this new model is as well. So let's talk through what makes the new Accord tick, starting with, well, what literally makes the new Accord tick, and that would be its powertrain. Now, this is actually the biggest difference compared to the outgoing Accord because the new model has greatly expanded the availability of its hybrid powertrain compared to the old one. The Accord Hybrid first came out back in 2005 as kind of a niche model, and now it's the majority of trim levels in the new 2023 Accord. You can still get a gasoline-powered non-hybrid engine in the base trims, the LX and the EX, both of which start around $30,000. That's a 1.5-liter turbo four-cylinder with about 190 horsepower. But if you upgrade to the higher level trims in the new Accord, you get a hybrid powertrain, just like this one. It's standard and it's mandatory. There's no other powertrain option for the higher level trims. It has 204 horsepower, Honda says, and trim levels equipped with the hybrid engine start around $32,000, although they can run all the way to this touring model, the top of the line, which is about $38,000. Now, this four-cylinder hybrid engine comes basically straight out of the Honda CR-V hybrid, and it's plopped here into the Accord with one major difference. The CR-V offers all-wheel drive. You can't get that in the new Accord. These are front-wheel drive only, still, unfortunately. And there's not much more to other versions of this car. Like I said, no more powerful version. There used to be a V6 with big power. Now it's gone. The hybrid is the top of the line. You also can't get a manual transmission anymore as of a couple years ago, and the Accord Coupe is dead as of about 5 years ago. So the Honda Accord lineup is getting pared down and smaller as sales kind of continue to dwindle. Now, as for fuel economy, in my mind, these figures make it very, very difficult to justify not getting the hybrid version of this car. You get the base level gasoline engine, and the EPA says 32 miles per gallon in combined city and highway driving, which is pretty good. But you upgrade to the hybrid, and the EPA says 48 miles per gallon in combined city and highway driving. A massive figure that used to be limited to tiny, compact hybrid cars. Now, the midsize Honda Accord has it for not much more money over the gas engine. Seems like a no-brainer to me. Now, if you're wondering about an electric version or a plug-in hybrid, the answer is no. Honda did a plug-in hybrid Accord years ago, like 2014. They didn't sell that many, and then they came out with the Clarity, which has been their plug-in hybrid for the last decade. But the Clarity is gone as of last year, so I thought maybe they would replace it with a plug-in hybrid Accord. Not so. Doesn't look like they're going to be doing one, at least not yet. And next up, since I'm out here, let's talk Accord exterior styling, which is, well, this car looks nice, but I guess tame is the word, maybe even bland. I think this is an attractive car, but it's really a basic, simple design. There's not a controversial line anywhere on the outside of this car. Now, you might be thinking, that's the Accord. They don't really do controversy, but there have been some Accords that took some risks, especially I remember the 2008 model. The design was a little questionable, but this one certainly isn't like that. I don't want to call it ugly because it's not at all. In fact, I think it looks nice. It's just forgettable, bland, simple. If you want a car that has like a muscular, cool design or some fun swoops or interesting lines, this is absolutely not that, to one of the craziest degrees I've ever seen. It's just a basic design. This is a car, we could call it, and that's about it. In fact, I can't see a single interesting quirk on the outside of this car worth pointing out, not one. So we go inside. And as you can imagine, the interior of the new Accord is much the same as the exterior, which is to say straightforward, basic, functional, but not exactly risky or daring. You look around, you see a nice interior for a mid-sized sedan. The materials aren't amazing, but they're totally fine, completely what you'd expect. And indeed, that's this interior, basically what you'd expect. Again, no crazy lines or weird screens or strange decisions in here. It's all functional, basic, straightforward, what you'd expect. But with that said, it is a little quirkier in this interior than it is on the outside of the new Accord. A couple of interesting items. One is the giant climate vent going from the center all the way over to the passenger side of the dashboard. Now, this isn't actually one big climate vent. Instead, it's just for style, to make it look continuous so you don't interrupt and stop and start the climate vents. It can be kind of ugly. You have this instead. It looks cool with this kind of mesh grill pattern over on the dashboard. Kind of like it, and I think it's kind of quirky. Same goes for the little switches in the climate vents to direct the airflow up, down, side to side. These little switches are sort of fun to move around, actually, a little addictive, and once again, a little quirky. And so is, on the side of the steering column, this hybrid badge. I have no idea why this is here. No one can really see it, especially not the driver sitting in the car. You often have badging in the interior to announce the trim level, the passenger side, the seats, but in the Accord Hybrid, you have none of that. It doesn't say hybrid anywhere in this interior except on the side of the steering column, which doesn't really make sense, but that's what you have. And next up, another interesting quirk of this interior comes in the center console. You have a button with a battery on it and a giant E inside the battery. Now you're thinking that if you press that, the car goes into electric mode, but that's not really what happens. In fact, that button just tells the car that you would rather drive in electric mode more frequently than you already are. I swear this is true. And so this isn't a mandate. You press this button, it doesn't just force the car into electric mode, but it makes it go into electric mode more. It sort of communicates your intentions, but not your actual necessity. Electric mode. So this button kind of gives the car a nice suggestion. Honda says it can also be used as a quiet mode, like if you're backing away from your driveway early in the morning, you don't want to wake the neighbors with your loud Honda Accord. you can press that button and go into EV mode. Now, also worth pointing out other drive modes here. You can see there's a switch directly above the battery button, goes up, down, and you have 3 modes to choose from. There's Eco, which shows on the screen an image of a car driving in a green area. There's the normal mode, which shows on the screen the car driving in like a city. And then there's Sport mode, which shows the car driving with some red lines to make it seem really sporty. But how sporty can it really be, given this is a hybrid 4-cylinder with about 200 horsepower? Next up, another interesting quirk of this interior. In the ceiling, you have a red SOS button for emergency services. But in order to use it, there's a silver cap over the button. You got to pull that down, and then you can press the SOS button. They want to make really certain that you're in an emergency, so it's like a 2-step process. Also kind of quirky and weird. If you look on the gauge cluster, you can see sort of an image of the car from above, and when you put on your brake lights, it shows your brake lights on in that image, exactly mirroring what's happening with the lights in the car in your screen. Not exactly sure why you'd need to know that, but well, it does. So let's talk about the screens in this car for a second, starting with the center infotainment screen. Now, this is the larger screen that's offered in the new Accord. The non-hybrid gas power models get a smaller screen. Here we got the big one, over 12 inches, and it's Honda's latest infotainment technology, newer even than the one in the new Pilot I recently tested, which is also brand new. So this is brand new, and it works pretty well. Very easy to use, responsive to your touch, intuitive, simple. Everything about this infotainment is pretty good. I also like the addition of Google Maps, which of course most people are already familiar with using on their phones and their computers. Well, now here it is built into your car navigation. That's great. Another benefit of this system, the dual screen setup. As you can see, most of the screen is a map here, but then over on the right side, you have the ability to scroll through various different other options in case you want to see like your map and your music at once. You can do that. A lot of Honda models haven't offered that in their recent infotainment systems, but now, thankfully, the new Accord does. I also like the fact that we still have an old school volume dial directly below the screen. Honda tried about 10 years ago to integrate this into the screen, and it did not go well. There are a lot of complaints. They learned their lesson, and all Honda models since then have had a manual adjustable knob. Same deal, by the way, with the climate controls. None have been integrated into the screen. They are all manual knobs, dials, buttons below to make them easier to use. Don't have to go into any menu. So a lot of good stuff to say in the center. The gauge cluster, a little bit less so. Full screen gauge cluster like most cars, but not tremendously configurable. Only this part over on the right can be changed and adjusted. And even then you can't see like big images of any of this stuff. And in some of the screens it can look pretty busy. Take a look here. There's just a lot of information in this gauge cluster screen, and it looks maybe like a little information overkill. The screen is maybe a little bit too small, but also more configurability would allow you to kind of pick and choose what you want to see on that screen. Honda doesn't really allow it. It's an okay gauge cluster screen, but it could be better. Also worth pointing out, one thing I find a little disappointing about this gauge screen, there's no blind spot camera system. In Hyundai and Kia models, you put on the turn signal and a blind spot camera shows up in the gauge cluster to let you see if there's anything in your blind spot. It's a really good feature, and Honda had it first. It had a feature called Lane Watch on a few of its models years ago. You put on your turn signal and a camera would come on your blind spot to show you what was there, but it seems like they got rid of it, or at least it hasn't spread throughout the lineup, and that's a mistake. It's a really useful feature, and I'm sad not to see it here. Now, with that said, the Accord does have some great driver assist technology. You turn it on the freeway and the car will steer for you pretty well. Of course, accelerate and brake. It stays in the lane when it's steering. It does a good job, and the steering wheel is capacitive touch, meaning you don't have to jiggle it to let the car know you're there. You just put your hand on it and the car does most of the work. The only drawback is lane changes. You put on your signal and this system will change lanes for you automatically, but it seems confused about what to do when it gets there. You then have to take over steering, or else it just keeps going into the next lane. It doesn't like recenter you, which is basically like not having a lane change feature at all. It's just really not good, frankly. And next up, we move on to the back seat in the new Accord, which is impressively roomy. These Accords are popular with, well, families being a mid-size sedan, but also with like Uber drivers, and that's because they're efficient, which this new Accord obviously is. They're reliable, which I'm sure it will be, and because they're roomy in back. You got a lot of space for passengers, and this feels like the roomiest Accord yet. I'm actually surprised just how much space back here there is, especially for legs and knees. You can put tall people back here, no problem. Now, other than that, once again, very functional, very straightforward in the back of this car. You get some charge ports back here, USB-C, which is nice to see, and directly above that, climate vents, which is also a nice touch in mid-size sedans. Not all of them have rear climate vents, so that's a good benefit. In terms of cup holders, they're in this center armrest. You fold it down, and then you have a place to rest your arms, and also cup holders, as you can see. The only nice, unusual, maybe touch back here is heated seats. This little button on the door, turn on your heated rear seats, which feels like a nice luxury car feature. Don't really expect to have it on the Accord, but this one does. Otherwise, basically no frills back here. Nice, comfortable leather seats, climate vents. It's good, but it's not quirky or weird, just like you'd expect from Honda. And next up, we move on to the cargo area in the new Accord, the trunk, which is, well, take a guess. Basic, straightforward, simple, practical, functional, just like everything else about this car. Actually, the biggest quirk about the trunk is that it's huge, quite large, bigger than I was expecting for this car, which only adds practicality. Even the surprising quirks of the new Accord just make it more practical. Other than that, the trunk is not particularly interesting. You lift up the floor, there's a little extra space for small items down here in case you don't want them rolling around. You also have a couple of hooks for like grocery bags if you don't want your milk crashing around in your trunk on the way home from the store. And you got latches back here that'll put down the rear seats, which is always nice to see in the cargo area. You don't have to go around to the seats themselves. You can just drop them from here. Other than that, again, straightforward, basic, simple, functional. That's kind of the theme of this Accord. Not exactly a car for people who want daring, but it's good. That's all there is to it. All right, driving the new Accord. And I gotta say, the brand new 11th generation Honda Accord, what does it drive like? Well, I mean, come on. What do you expect? It's not gonna be a particularly exciting car. And indeed, it's actually less exciting than I was thinking it would be. You know, I've been getting a lot of emails, hey, go review the Accord, review the new Accord. So I decided to do that, and I'm here and I'm doing it, and it's like, why did so many people want to see this? This is not particularly exciting or interesting. To be clear, it's a nice car. It's a good, like a legitimately good, nice car. It drives well, it's fuel efficient, it's got a lot of space, it's got nice features, it's a good car. It is not an exciting one. To me, I feel like this is kind of the CR-V or the Pilot, if you will, of cars. It's nice, it drives great for who it's intended for, but it's not an enthusiast car for an enthusiast market. So with that out of the way, if you're an enthusiast, let's talk about the rest of this. So interior space, like I mentioned before, the back seats are big, also true up front. I have absolutely no problem finding a totally easy, reasonable place to sit, to get, my knees, my legs, my head, all of it. It's all, these cars were made for a general wide swath of the population, and this is that. In terms of like noise inside this car, it's pretty good. It's not really as loud as I was expecting it would be. The engine is louder than I thought it would be, especially at higher RPMs. You hear it a little bit more than I was expecting. But otherwise, the exterior, the outside world is drowned out better than I thought. You can hear some of the drone. The powertrain. The problem with a small powertrain like this, small engine with not that much power, is it kind of can struggle sometimes to get going. And so you get on it, and it really has to work and get high up into the rev range to make that happen. Now the benefit is, most of the time you're not doing that, and it can be pretty efficient when you're not flooring it. But when you are, not even flooring it, when you are just accelerating, you hear more than you might want. Inside this car, it's quite nice, actually. Now, this is the touring model. Like I said, around $38,000 for this one. It's the top spec version. But it still feels like a lot of car for 38 grand when you consider you get 48 miles per gallon. You get this great infotainment with Google Maps integrated into it. Driver assist tech, it'll steer for you, brake, it theoretically will lane change, although it doesn't really work. There's a lot to like about this car for the price point. Like, it's a great value. It always has been. Roomy, reliable, efficient, not that expensive. I mean, $38, that's less or about the same as the average new car price. And this thing feels like a lot better than average. Wireless charger, good tech, good gas mileage. Like, this is a good vehicle. 10 years ago, this would have been like a nice luxury car, but it's just not fun. And that's kind of the reality. In terms of like ride quality, it's actually smoother than I was expecting. It's pretty comfortable driving this car around, and a nice comfortable, seat as well. I think the simple truth about this car is it's incredibly competent and incredibly good. Like, it's a really seriously excellent car. It's just great if you want a mid-size sedan. And fewer people do every year. The Ford Fusion left the market, the Chevy Malibu left the market, and yet sales for the mid-size sedan segment as a whole continue to decline. It's not like those people were gobbled up by the Accord and its sales took off. It's like the whole segment is just falling and falling. If you're gonna do it, I think this is one of the best cars to do it in. I've driven the new Camrys. I think that they're good, but I think this is better. The interior is better, the ride seems better. Obviously, the fuel economy is a tremendous benefit. I do wish they offered all-wheel drive, but generally speaking, I think that there's a lot to love about this car. It's not the car that's at fault. It's the world of the mid-size sedan. People would just rather sit up higher, have the extra practicality of a crossover, and have the extra, all-weather capability in so much of the country. So this is a truly, truly excellent car if you want that, which you'd think most people would, but most people will buy a CR-V instead. And so that's the new 2023 Honda Accord, the newest version of a popular car in a once popular market segment, the midsize sedan. This is a great car, and the new version will surely boost sales, but shoppers have made it clear, no matter how great the Accord is, they want SUVs. Fortunately, Honda makes some pretty good SUVs too. Anyway, now it's time to give the new Accord a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 46 out of 100, which places the Accord here against some similar cars, including a few crossovers, since so many sedan shoppers are now also considering SUVs. Overall, the new Accord is great, and the hybrid version is compelling, with decent performance, good gas mileage, a roomy interior, lots of equipment, and good pricing. Only two real drawbacks. One, it's a sedan in the age of SUVs, and two, it's kind of boring. But that's always been the Accord. Not exactly exciting, but very competent. The new one remains the same.